So today we're going to talk about homology, which is in and of itself kind of an interesting word. So let's look at that for a second. So from Encyclopedia Britannica, it says that homology is the similarity of the structure, physiology, or development of different species of organisms based on their descent from a common evolutionary ancestor. So basically, it's easy to see how all of these animals evolved from the same single descendant creature because, well, there have been some changes along the way, but pretty much their bodies are built the same way. So this little visual here is again from Encyclopedia Britannica, and it's got the forelimbs of 6 vertebrates. Sorry. So as you can see, we've got a box turtle, dolphin, human, horse, fruit bat, and a chicken. And they say that they're homologous because we've got the humerus of different sizes and lengths. We've got then the radius and the ulna here. In the horse, the ulna gets very small, but it is still there. Bat, chicken, then we've got the carpals this row. And the bat and the chicken, they're very small. And the chicken, I think it's just that one bone. Metacarpals, this blue area. Like here again in the chicken, it's like 3 phalanges. We've got all of these different bones, including, the horse's whole foot. And there we go. Okay, now this, as you can see, these bones look very different in these different organisms and these different animals based on, how they're being used. And that's kind of their point. They all came from one particular creature, but then depending on how the animal needed to use their forelimb, the different bones kind of evolved differently to fit the needs of that particular organism. So, we might not necessarily expect to see a dolphin with all these joints in their flipper. But you can also see that, for the horse, some of these bones are very, very small. And actually, the largest bone in a horse's front leg is the radius, whereas in our arm, it's, the humerus. Okay, so here we've got the horse's radius. The humerus is up here, like in their shoulder, whereas our longer arm, or our longer bone, is the humerus. So very, very different functions there. And we've got all of these different metacarpals, whereas in the horse, again, there's just one. So you're starting to see that maybe these don't have really a similar structure. I mean, there's kind of sort of the same order of joints, and there's kind of sort of the same amount of different sections of bones, but that's really about it. I mean, especially when you start looking at this, like the chicken and the horse and the human, they're not looking anything alike. And if you think about it, it's supposed to be, based upon a common evolutionary ancestor, which really kind of doesn't make sense either, because I guess the most recent theory is that birds are descended from dinosaurs. So birds came directly from reptiles. So there shouldn't be any common evolutionary ancestor between a chicken and a human. So they shouldn't even be on the same diagram. And as well as, box turtles then are, they're a modern reptile, but they're agreed, their descendants should have been around with the dinosaurs also. So it's kind of agreed that these organisms have different ancestors anyway, and yet they're being shown by a major organization as the evidence of this common ancestry when it's been agreed upon that they have a different ancestry. So this idea is just kind of that bodies in general are made the same, but they've been adapted to whatever the organism needs. Sorry. It's almost like someone had this plan on how to make an effective forelimb and then just tweaked it for what the animal was going to need. Sounds an awful lot like engineering instead of, random happenstance from a common ancestor that isn't a common ancestor anyway. Okay, so why this is important is when we then talk about the evolution of humans. And from your readings, there was a lot of talk about these humanids that they've been finding, the ape men and the ape women that they've been finding, and how that's happened. This is another visual from, I guess, the Plain Dealer, talking about the surprising similarities between humans and Lucy. And so they've enlarged Lucy because when they originally found her, they admit that she was only 3 feet. But if we bring her up to 5.5 feet, we can see all these amazing similarities. But if you look closer at this diagram, you can see that only the pink areas are the bones they actually found. So they're saying there's this surprising similarity between this short, wide pelvis that humans and Lucy have versus the tall pelvis that chimps have. But then you go over here and realize they didn't actually find her pelvis. So they're saying that there's this amazing similarity between human pelvis and Lucy's pelvis, but they never found Lucy's pelvis. They're basing all of this just on this tiny little pink section, which is not the part that they were talking about anyway. I mean, this little pink section is, basically the same as the chimps, kind of coccyx area and the lower lumbar, And then we've got long legs and proportionately shorter arms. Well, yeah, but they didn't find all of the leg. Here we only found part of a leg and part of an arm. And if you look at this picture when she's 3 feet tall, the legs are here and the arms are there. That doesn't look like long legs and proportionally shorter arms. That only happens when they make her taller. So all of these, and there's also talking about the box rib cage with the shoulders pointed to the sides. Well, they found a few ribs and they found a scapula, but they didn't find any of the spine to kind of orient it. So they're orienting all of these things based on what they want it to be. It's like when you have a puzzle, but you're missing, clearly, I guess the total number was, 60%, because I guess they only found 40% of the bones, is about as complete as Lucy's, 30 to 40%. Okay, so I guess this is a different organism. They found another organism, and it's taller, but still, they only found 30 to 40% of the organism. So if you had a puzzle and you were missing 60 to 70% of the pieces, you can make that puzzle look like whatever you wanted. And that's exactly what they're doing here. They're trying to manipulate the materials so that it says what they want. And again, this is a great example of where the bias comes in, because as it said in the article and in the video, when they're talking about the, I believe it was the pit down man, and someone had just kind of placed these bones where they assumed it ended up being Darwin who found them, which gave them, instant credibility. But then if you actually looked at them, one of the teeth then clearly had work done, but people just chose not to see that particular point. And so all of this, and that went around for 50 years, and then when they discovered it was a hoax, one of the leading scientists from the national lab said, that there's no science in this. People are just seeing what they want to see. And that was from a scientist's point of view, not from, a creationist, not from someone in the church. And then also there was the part about the Nebraska man and how they found a single tooth. And from that, an artist was commissioned to, make a portrait of this based on a tooth. Now, there's clearly no way he could do that, so he said, okay, I've been told to draw an ape man, so I'll draw an ape man. And that was then used, as the article said, in court legislation. But then when they looked at it again and they looked at it objectively, it wasn't even an ape's tooth. It was a pig's tooth. So there is definitely a lot of bias, and there's a lot of making the pieces fit, and making the pieces fit what you want them to fit. And while creationists are always accused of letting their bias cloud their judgment, it seems like that's not something that we're allowed to even bring up, because if we ask people to look at something like Lucy's skeleton or Katanumu's skeleton, where there's only 40% of the bones at most, and look at them objectively instead of looking at all of these so-called similarities that are based on bones that weren't found, then we're told we're being closed-minded and stupid. And so that's something that is definitely difficult to deal with and difficult to find a place within the scientific community. And especially when, you're and the scientific community itself is saying, well, birds evolved from dinosaurs, but look how similar they are to humans, where no one has ever said anything remotely similar to humans evolved from dinosaurs. So they're sending conflicting messages, but they just don't want to see it and they don't want to admit it, and then they want to tell creationists that we're being stupid and closed-minded when we point out the logical, obvious fallacies with the work that they are doing.